So a bunch of you watched the $100,000 video. Thank you for that. Genuinely, I did not expect that one to do what it did. And the top comment, over and over, in different words, was basically the same question. Okay, cool. I get why the first $100,000 is brutal. What happens after? Does it actually get easier, or is that just something people say to make you keep going? Fair question. And honestly, it's the exact question I remember asking myself once I actually hit that number. Like, okay, I did the hard part everyone talks about, so what now? Nobody really tells you what the next stretch looks like, because apparently everyone stops talking about it once you're past the milestone they were warning you about. So I went back into the same spreadsheet from that video and just kept running the numbers forward. Same $1,000 a month, same 8% average return, same boring index fund. I wanted to see, with real numbers, not vibes, what the timeline actually looks like once you're past the part everybody complains about. And it's actually a little wild once you see it laid out. Quick recap, so this makes sense if you didn't see the first one. Getting from zero to your first $100,000 at $1,000 a month takes right around 6.5 years. That's the slow, grindy, is this even working part. Here's what happens next. Getting from $100,000 to $200,000, same $1,000 a month, same 8%. That takes about 4 years and 3 months. Already faster. Not dramatically, but noticeably. From $200,000 to $500,000, bigger jump, I know, but stick with me. That takes about 7 years and 10 months. From $500,000 to a full million, it's about 7 years and 2 months. Add it all up, and getting from zero to $1 million at $1,000 a month consistently takes roughly 25.5 years. Here's the part that actually matters, though. Out of that full $1 million, you only personally put in about $307,000 over those 25 years. The other $696,000, more than 2/3 of the entire total, is pure growth. The market did more than twice as much work as you did, and it did almost all of that heavy lifting in the second half of the timeline, not the first. The first $100,000 is you, basically alone, pushing a stalled car up a hill. I said that in the last video, and I still think it's the right image. But somewhere in that $100,000 to $500,000 stretch, something shifts, and it's not really about motivation or discipline. It's just math catching up to itself. By the time you're around $300,000, $400,000, the account itself is generating real money every single year without you touching it. Not enough to retire on, not yet, but enough that you start noticing it. You check your balance, and some months the market added more than your own contribution did. That never happened in year 1. It happens constantly by year 12. It doesn't feel like the finish line. It's not supposed to. But it stops feeling like you're doing this completely alone, which, if you've been in that first stretch, you know is genuinely most of the battle. Okay, real question somebody's gonna ask in the comments, so let's just address it now. What if you're sitting at, say, $350,000, right in the middle of this stretch, and the market drops 30%? Doesn't that wreck the whole timeline? Short answer, it stings, but it doesn't wreck anything if you keep going. This is actually the part of the journey where a crash matters least, weirdly, even though it feels like it should matter most, because the dollar amount dropping is bigger. Here's why. You're still contributing $1,000 a month the whole time. When the market's down, that same $1,000 buys more shares than it did the month before. So a crash during this stretch isn't just something you survive, it's something that quietly speeds up the recovery once things turn back around, because you were buying in at a discount the entire time without doing anything differently. The people who actually get hurt by a crash in this stretch aren't the ones who keep contributing. It's the ones who panic, stop the automatic transfer, or pull money out at the bottom because it felt like the responsible thing to do in the moment. The math doesn't care about the crash nearly as much as it cares about whether you kept showing up during it. Here's a number that surprised me when I ran it. A lot of people, once they're past that first $100,000, are also a few years further into their career, maybe got a couple raises, and can actually bump the contribution up. So, let's say, instead of staying at $1,000 a month the whole way, you bump it to $1,500 a month once you cross that first 100K. At that rate, getting from $100,000 to $1 million takes about 16 years and 8 months instead of 19 years and 2 months. That's 2.5 years shaved off, just from adding $500 a month during the stretch where you're already past the hardest part. And here's the thing that makes this even more worth it. You're not fighting the same uphill battle you were in year 1. Adding that extra $500 a month at $150,000 in the bank doesn't feel like the same sacrifice it would have felt like when you had nothing. The habit's already built. The account's already growing. You're just feeding a machine that's already running instead of trying to start one from a dead stop. I want to be honest about something because I think a lot of content in this space oversells this part. Your actual daily life, somewhere around $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in the bank. It mostly doesn't change. You're not driving something different. You're probably not eating out more. If you're doing this right, your habits from the first $100,000 just keep running. Same automatic transfer, same boring index fund, same nothing happening on purpose approach. What changes is quieter than that. It's sleeping slightly better during a bad month at work because you know you've got real runway now. It's not panicking the same way when the car needs a $1,200 repair because that number used to feel like a crisis and now it's just an annoying Tuesday. It's starting to actually believe, not just intellectually know, that this is working because you've now got a decade plus of receipts proving it. Nobody around you notices any of this happening, by the way. That's kind of the whole thing about this stretch of the journey. It's the least Instagrammable part of building wealth there is. Here's the mistake I see a lot, and honestly one I almost made myself around the $150,000 mark. People hit that first big number, feel that first real sense of progress, and their brain goes, okay, I've proven I can do this, maybe I can loosen up a little. Lifestyle creep starts sneaking in right around here specifically, because for the first time there's actual slack in the budget to sneak into. And look, some of that's fine, genuinely, you're allowed to enjoy some of this. But the people who end up with real numbers 20 years later are almost always the ones who kept the contribution the same, or increased it, instead of letting the raise or the bonus quietly get absorbed into a slightly nicer life every single year. The habit that got you the first 100K is the exact same habit that gets you the next 900. It doesn't change. That's honestly the boring secret nobody wants to hear. I actually caught myself doing this around $180,000. Got a decent raise at work, and my brain immediately went to, well, I could bump my contribution, or I could finally get the nicer apartment. I did neither, actually. I just sat on it for like 2 months, feeling weirdly guilty about wanting the apartment, which, in hindsight, is its own problem, but that's a different video. Point is, that tug happens to basically everyone somewhere in this stretch, and how you handle that one decision, repeated over and over across a decade, is basically the entire difference between the people who get to $1 million and the people who plateau around $300,000 for the rest of their lives. So does it get easier after the first $100,000? Yeah, actually it does, and now you've got real numbers behind that, instead of just having to trust me. Every stretch after that first one moves a little faster, because you're not doing it by yourself anymore. The money you already saved is doing more and more of the work every single year. But easier doesn't mean different. Same contribution, same account, same boring routine that got you here in the first place. The first $100,000 asks the most of you because it's the only part where it's entirely you. Everything after that, you've got company. I think that's actually the part I wish someone had told me back when I was still in that first stretch, still checking the account every week, wondering if any of it was real. It's not that the work stops, it's that you stop doing it alone at some point, and once that happens, showing up every month starts to feel less like effort and more like just maintenance. You're not pushing anymore, you're just not getting out of the way. If you're still in that first $100,000 right now, reading this thinking, it feels impossibly far off. It's not a permanent state. It's a phase, and it's the shortest feeling, but longest actually one, you'll go through in this whole process. Everything past it moves faster, gets less lonely, and eventually starts running mostly on its own. If this helped you see what's actually ahead, subscribe, because next time I'm breaking down exactly what changes, mentally and financially, once you cross the $1 million mark.